Through since our business meeting, a suggestion has come up, and I think it's a good one for us to ponder and vote on. There was a suggestion because of our age and et cetera, that we have the reunion in 3 years instead of 5 years. Here. So I have a motion on the floor to have the next reunion in 3 years. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Now, the person that brought that to me was Evelyn, so she's the one that's going to be doing the work, so outstanding. So we will do it in, what is that, 22? That sounds like a good year, 2022. So, okay, and then the next thing is anybody besides Roy from Pennsylvania, or want to be from Pennsylvania, or could have been from Pennsylvania. Are you from Pennsylvania? Roy? Ben? Chris Ben?
I'm trying to figure out who was here from somebody else from Pennsylvania. I'm in Allen. Where are you?
Now you know.
All right, we'll talk.
Amazing. Okay, for the people that weren't with us in 2014, we started a thing called a round robin, and it goes fairly quickly. But Pearl videotapes it for posterity, and or we can remember what you look like in what year is this, 2019, and what you sounded like, and how well you remembered. And the three things we ask for you to do is limit it to 30 minutes. And tell us what you did before OCS and what you did during OCS, you know, like you were the company commander, or you were somebody special, or you hid like I did. And then tell us what you did after OCS in the military, and then tell us in your civilian life. And it's, yes ma'am. Oh, okay. I know you all know I'm going to knock it over. Okay, so I'll start it, and if I repeat everything you totally know about me, that's called life.
Then make up something else.
We won't remember anyway.
Larry's back there saying he's going to not remember it anyway, so what the heck. Anyway, before going to OCS, I was a typical kid, skated through high school, went to apprenticeship program, skated through that, and did what I thought I wanted to do for the rest of my life, be a draftsman. And then when they started the thing called the draft, to not go to Vietnam, I enlisted with a guaranteed drafting school. And then I saw the guy over in the corner with a butter bar that wasn't doing anything, and I immediately knew that's what I wanted to do in life. And so my black sergeant, I went to him and I said, you know, how can I be that guy? And he mumbled something like, you don't want to be that blankety blank 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 guy. And with a big smile, I said, yes, I do. And so anyway, he got me finally to take the test, and I don't know how I passed the test because I really had problems in school. So anyway, but I snuck through those tests, and I got my branch I wanted, engineering OCS, and I went to combat engineer school at Leonard Wood. And at Leonard Wood, they put us on hold waiting for our class to start at Belvoir. And who else in here did the same thing I'm talking about? Look at that. Isn't that kind of weird? You you know? And so, once we got done with combat engineer school, they canceled my class at Belleville. And so they gave me a choice of going to Vietnam as a combat engineer, also called labor, or go to infantry OCS. And my whole goal in life was not to go to Vietnam. So I said, yep, that OCS thing sounds great in infantry. So I went over there, and needless to say, I became an infantry platoon leader at Fort Rucker, Alabama, the aviation school. And we used to scare the crap out of aviators with artillery simulators and all that stuff. And then I went to Delta Company, 1st and 6th Infantry, Marical Division, and met some of the greatest people I have ever met in my life. And after that, I became a headquarters company commander after my appendix went out. Actually, they ruptured on the medevac. And if you want an embarrassing thing, to wake up and some colonel is sitting in front of you, you're sitting in a ward with people with no arms, no legs, all this other crap, and the guy's reading my citation for a Purple Heart. And I'm sitting there just screaming, no, 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 not me, you know, appendix, appendix. You know, but anyway, if I was a real rep, I would have just smiled as I got my Purple Heart for my appendix. But anyway, I went on to stay in the military for 39 years. Active reserves, recalled out of retirement in 2006. Went to, where'd I go? Kuwait. I went to Kuwait, 3rd Army headquarters. Was the senior planner for the Iraqi surge, the planning process to bring in 5 more brigades, equipment, and the people to train them. I was just a project planner. I didn't train people or anything, you know, manually like that. And I was at age 60. After that, Pearl and I went back to our retirement. I was a superintendent with the city of Tucson for 29 years. Retired from that, retired from the Army, disability, and we're happily living in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. And we live on a lake, and we can go down and get in our boat, go putt around the lake. And 2 of you have come and visited us. And there's an open invitation that we always have a bedroom and a fishing pole available for anyone that wants to come. And you can bring your whole family and your sub-family. And we got a couple extra bedrooms and what do we got? A futon or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got 2 extra bedrooms and a futon, so. Okay, that's my life, and my fun things I do in life, plan reunions. It's almost getting to the 30-minute mark. Plan reunions, and I have fallen in love with all my brothers. So we're starting in the year.
First, we'll need to thank Colonel Lynn and his wife. I'm going to tell you, this is a lot of work. So, we can't thank them enough. Anyway, graduated from Iowa State, married, wound up in Vietnam. What did I do after that? Oh, yeah. Actually, I graduated from OCS TAC officer, which nobody wanted to be. Went to Vietnam. Came home, lived in Omaha for a year, didn't like that, went back to a small town, owned a clothing store, worked for the bank, and now we're in an insurance real estate business, and if I could get my wife to retire, I'd need to have a reunion for a year. Anyway, I really would like to thank Lynn and Pearl. I think they've done a great job.
Good for him. I like Pearl too.
just for posterity. Remember that part?
Yeah, but I don't want to be charged with anything. My name is Don Githens. I was in college before OCS. Draft board said, you have 6 months to get out, or we're going to take you, so I signed up. Deferred entry, went to OCS. Training officer following that for 6 months at Fort Dix, Vietnam. Came back, I extended for 1 year because I didn't want to hit the country without a job. I was a training officer for MPs. I trained infantry tactics to MP, ROTC. But once it was fun letting them get lost in the woods, really was. After that, I worked for a steel manufacturer for about 7 years, and then I entered the world of law enforcement. I spent 22 years in law enforcement, and then I worked for the state of Florida, and I retired probably 10 years ago. And I'm happily retired and don't plan to work again.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Stewart, and you know what I did before and after OCS really is of little consequence in many, many ways. Really, what's a whole lot more important to me is what's going on here and now today with you and our families and our friends gathered here today. I also have got to say that OCS was one of the most profound experiences of my life, as was serving our country in the U.S. Army. And I'll never forget that time.
What's my name? Brian Landry from South Louisiana, and Dave's going to try to tell me that I need to have an interpreter. But anyway, I graduated from high school in '66 in South Louisiana, went off to college in North Louisiana, failed at that endeavor, which caused me to be drafted by our uncle. Ended up going to basic at Fort Polk. Joined all of you guys in Benning in November of what, '68. Went through all of that. Left Benning, went to back to Fort Polk as a training officer for an AIT company. Went to Vietnam as a platoon leader, company commander, and an ops officer. Came back to the States, went back to school with a different attitude, and graduated with a degree in architecture. Worked in South Louisiana for about 6 to 8 years. Moved to Florida in '85, working in the same business, and been there ever since. Retired in 2015, and I love retirement. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see everyone. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dave Jones, and I'm one of those nuts who want to be in the middle of it all the time. And well, thank you for all the compliments about my dad's visit to our graduation. And it made me think of a couple of things. And he was an aviator in the middle of it. You know, probably don't know the whole story. He was a Doolittle Raider. If you've read the Great Escape, he was a tunnel digger. He was in the cavalry to start with, so he was sort of at 16. Then he got thrown out. No, 15 got thrown out. 16 got thrown out. 17 they say, "Hell, we'll keep you when you get lieutenant." So they went to flight school. So I've had this. Grew up in a house full of guys who were basically heroes. All World War II guys who had done pretty serious stuff. But my dad said, I need to go to college to be an aviator, and that wouldn't stop me. So he said, you know, if you're not going to fly, you need to be a doughboy. Meaning by that is if you're in the military, you do what the military does. And that's being an infantry officer. So I went to flight school, got thrown out, safety violation. But they sent me here, so here I am now, I'm a lieutenant. But I was going to go back to flight school until I went over to Building 4 And these guys had Wilkie buttons and patches and all that crap, so I'm gonna get me some of those. So I basically went to every school possible. Then I went to Vietnam, then I was supposed to go MACV. I said, well, I said, I'm not doing that, that's not real Army. So I want to be in the real Army. So I went, and I got myself assigned to 173rd Airborne Brigade. And tell you what, guys, you talk about not giving me support. I hear all these stories about you guys. I was in the field 8 days after I got in the country. Last time I came out was to a hospital. So that's not a good thing. So if you anybody who's thinking about that kind of thing, make sure they do where you get some support from the rest of the Army. I stayed on active duty for 10 years and had a lot of jobs. Mainly I was here at Fort Benning, so it was fun to be back. Uncle Sam says, we don't need you anymore. So that year I graduated from the advanced course. My father-in-law died. We had a baby. And I graduated from college right over here at Columbus State University. So now it's time to, what are you going to do now, Jones? I never lived off base until I lived here in Fort. So what the hell am I going to do? So my parents were living in Florida and I'm a Texan. So where can I get a jump status? So I went to Florida because they had a special forces company there, and I became a A-team commander, then I was a B-team commander, then I was a C-team XO. But I went to college to be a veterinarian because I figured, if you're going to do something hard, you might as well do something hard. Well, about a semester and a half, I figured, this ain't going to get it because I can't get a 4-point. My daddy's not buying a new wing at the new hospital. So I became a landscape architect, because that's what you do. If you're in the infantry, you're in the bushes, so hell, I'll go to landscape architect. I didn't even know what it was. But now I are one. I got to Southwest Florida, bought a company. I went to work at a company that I now own. And then the stupidity isn't that bad. In 1995, I started a site construction company. So now I got 2 companies. I did retire from the Guard. That was the smart thing. But I'm now trapped. I'm 72 years old. I work. My sons work for me. I'm a professional. I've worked and I will work. And someday, somebody will probably come into my desk and say, "Well, they can't do that. He's going to get it." So yeah, that's Dave Jones. Thank you all.
The room, so here I am. I'm Joe Cunningham. Graduated from high school in Flint, Michigan in 1967. Went off to college at the Flint Ranch at University of Michigan. The freshman year, I sort of fell off the wagon. Too much drinking, too much partying, had to drop a class. So I was drafted. Even the drafted story is kind of interesting because after I dropped the class, I knew they were going to come and get me. So I volunteered for the draft. Unfortunately, they came and got me before the semester was over. So I actually had to have an appeal hearing with the draft board for them to allow me to stay at the University of Michigan to get my 8 credits or whatever. And the deal was that I would go right into the Army, no physical, no going back home, just go into the Army. So I went into the Army and I took all these tests and they came to me and said, you know, they really need second lieutenants right now. And you qualified on your test, do you want to be one? So you only got to stay for an extra 10 months, 2 years and 10 months. And I thought about it and I said, well, it sounds like a pretty good deal. And so I signed up. I had my basic at Fort Knox, my advanced infantry training at Fort Dix, and then off to OCS. So I was pretty young, but I understand there were people who were younger than I was. But OCS was really formative to me because I was hanging around with all these great guys, these smart guys, and some not so smart guys. But I found a lot of character and values that actually stayed with me for the rest of my life. In the military, after I got OCS, I went to airborne school and then off to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I became part of I went to JFK Center Warfare School and I became a Special Forces officer. You don't hear much about those guys over here at Fort Benning because we were doing something different. So we were like undercover. We were like the dark side. But I still had a very good tour with the Special Forces people. I ended up in Pleiku for a year. Although I didn't get to an A detachment, which is what I wanted to do, I became an S4, which got me to all 12 A detachments. So I put in my year, had some fun, tried to stay out of trouble. Got back, got my degree, moved out to Seattle, met my wife, got married, got 4 kids, and lived happily ever after.
Hi, my name is Tim Jorson. I think I'm the unknown quantity in this whole reunion. I frankly came here and I could not have picked any of you out of a 2-person lineup. I barely remember who the hell I was assigned to. I was from the 97 Company. I had a bad personality conflict with a lieutenant varsity who told me I did not have a sense of urgency. I thought I was doing very well in OCS. I had a 1 average, or the highest average. I had a good PT score. The academic and physical aspects of the program were not a problem. But apparently, they set me up. I was a company commander, I think, in the 12th week. And my peers told me that I had done okay, you know, not spectacular, but I had certainly met the bar. But he didn't agree. He had rated me an 05, and we had a serious discussion in which I did not say Sir Candidate Jorson. It was a very bitter exchange, and I was almost on the verge of quitting. But I was married. I realized the implications of quitting, and I chose not to do that. They recycled me to your company. It was only a 2-week recycle, so I agreed to accept it. I was placed in the 1st platoon. I think Lieutenant Wheeler was my TAC officer. I think he had grown tired of harassing people, because I remember the 12 weeks went by with relatively little harassment, which was great, because I never truly believed in that method of developing leaders. I graduated I graduated with you guys on 23 May. I went to Fort Lewis. I was assigned to be a training officer in a basic training brigade. It was the best job I had in the Army at that point, because it was about the easiest job. I realized with about the 2nd day that the drill sergeants knew what they were doing. I didn't. I got out of their way. We had just a crusty old group of people. Sergeant Miller was the first sergeant. He loved to teach bayonet training. I remember him saying there were 2 kinds of bayonet fighters in the world, the quick and the dead. The worst thing I ever did to a trainee in that whole, I was there about 6 months, was one morning, I think, I surprised a trainee, and he was just startled, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, Sergeant." I looked at him and I said, "Damn it, trainee, I don't work for a living. I'm not a sergeant, I don't work for a living, I'm an officer." And that was probably very true. I went to Vietnam I went to the Jungle Warfare School. I thought that was probably not the most, they had dumbed down the course so much that the biggest benefit of that was that the 2 weeks counted towards your tour in Vietnam. Again, an academic test, I do relatively well in those, and I have 2 snakes on my diploma. That was probably the only honors recognition I had in the Army. I was assigned to the 199th in Vietnam. I was a rifle platoon leader. I had a great platoon. Obviously, I had some questions with the war, and I think sometimes the biggest struggle I had was the dissidence of trying to be a small unit leader in a war that I truly did not believe in, and that was tough. But I tried to do my job, and one of the most startling things was that about 20 years ago, in 1999, when you had your first reunion, I actually attended a reunion of the 199th, and we were drinking one night in the hospitality suite of the Washington hotel we were in, and a guy from the 3rd platoon, and I was the 2nd platoon leader, came up to me and he said, "Lieutenant Jorson, you were really a great platoon leader. Everybody in the company, the other platoons, really respected you, and he could have knocked me over with a feather. That was the greatest compliment. I never was really concerned about my OERs. I was somewhat insubordinate, and whatever chance I had about a career, I probably ended when the 199 disbanded. Got drunker than hell one night, and I poured a drink over the battalion commander's head. That probably was not a good strategy if I was going to be a career person. I had actually thought about staying in when I was at Fort Lewis. The battalion commander and the XO really encouraged me to think about applying for an RA commission. I told him I would think about it. But I felt for a while that I was really a liberal, and I thought that most of the people I met in the Army were quite conservative, and maybe the Army needed some liberal, humanitarian, liberal arts graduate officers. But I had been admitted to law school before I graduated from the University of Minnesota, and they held the seat open for me. So I decided when I got out in '71 and attended law school. Practiced law for about 10 years, and I was with a small firm. We specialized in anybody who walked in the door, and I did everything from divorces to murder cases and appellate work, and I kind of burned out from that. About the last 30 years, I actually worked for a state government, and I worked in a lot of interesting areas. I worked in actually a state veterans home for a while. I worked in the Department of Employee Relations, where I developed a product that all of you should probably have. I developed a long-term care insurance project for your program for the state of Minnesota. But most of the time I worked in purchasing. I managed and bid government contracts. That was sort of contract law, and I was fairly good at it. I thought I was a zealous steward of the taxpayers' money, even though I was a tax and spend liberal. I want to tell you that I am so glad I came. This is the first one I've attended. You have all been so kind, even though you had no damn idea who the hell I was. And it's been great. You have been great to marry. And I just want to tell you that you pikers who have been married 50 years, Mary and I on Saturday are celebrating our 159th anniversary. We met late in life. I'm divorced, Mary is divorced. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, and he just got married for the first time at 60. We were sitting next to each other. Within a half an hour, she became the love of my life. We decided, given our age, that we would celebrate our anniversary every month. So Saturday is 159th month, and for those who couldn't do the math, that's 13 years and 3 months. So, but thank you for being so open. You are a great bunch of guys. I fully intend to come to future reunions. It has been a pleasure to see you. I also feel good that not all of you were gung-ho and couldn't wait to get to Vietnam, because I thought I would be the only one that would admit that. But again, thank you, and thank you to Lynn and Pearl for all of the work they did. It's just been a great experience, and I have greatly enjoyed my last 4 days here. You're a wonderful group of people, and thank you very much.
Steve Kroger. I've got a little different accent. I'm Chicago born and raised, so Brian can translate for me if I need. Like a lot of you guys, I ended up in the draft. I was going to college, had a bright idea, thought I'd work in the day, take school at night. Draft board decided that wasn't the way to go, and next thing I know, I was wearing green and running around Fort Leonard with Missouri. Had a chance to go to engineering OCS, like a lot of the other guys. They called up and they said he had spinal meningitis outbreak at Fort Belvoir, and I had a choice, Vietnam or Fort Benning. I chose Fort Benning, which I think was, for my aim, was a great idea. ended up after Fort Benning at Fort Lewis, or Fort Carson, Colorado, as a platoon leader, company XO, headquarters company XO with the National Guard Brigade. And it was one of the best times of my Army career. The National Guard knows how to do it right. We had a lot of good guys and a lot of fun. In Vietnam, we ended up as a MAT team leader in 3 Corps. Came out of the Army, back to school, went to work in Chicago as an insurance broker, and finished my career about 10 years ago. Met a lovely lady sitting in the corner there, agreed to be my wife, and it was the best deal I ever made. A couple of things that struck me during this whole reunion. When we were in the museum, they were talking about how we were treated when we came back from Vietnam. And sometimes I wonder if what we did there was worth it. But then we sat with those young people at the OCS luncheon. And I thought, when they come back, and all these guys come back from where they're servicing, they're stationed now in the war zones, people thank them for their service. And if we had anything to do with that, I think we did a good job. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Alan Leeds. It's September of '67. I enter my senior year in college. I go to the draft board, small town. Said, you're going to be drafted by September of '68 after you graduate. I said, I've got to take this into my own hands. So what do? I go down into Haven. They got 3 recruiters there. First one is the Air Force. I go into him, I said, I want to join the Air Force. I want to go to the officers training school. He says, take the test. Took the test, passed it. They sent the application to Lackland Air Force Base. Flight comes back, school closed, too many applicants for next year and a half. Go around the corner, who's the next? The Navy. Navy says you gotta go down to New York to take the Navy test. I go down to New York, take the Navy test. I couldn't figure the math out to save my life. So I come back to the Navy. What's left? I missed the Coast Guard. I don't know how I missed the Coast Guard. They weren't there. I got the Army and the Marines. And I said, I'm not totally nuts. So anyway, I go to the Army recruiter. He says, take the test. I take the test. He says, you passed it. Delayed enlistment. Okay, fine. Graduate college May of '68, July 8th. I'm in Fort Dix, New Jersey. What do? They say, okay, put down what's your 3 arms branch you want in the order you want them. I put down artillery, armor, infantry. They then say, where do you, this is good. What duty stations would you like? I remember this. I put down Israel, Israel, Israel. So, we get out of Fort, we get told we're graduating from basic. Where are we going? We're going to Fort Polk. I said, oh, it's Fort Polk and it's Fort Benning. We go to Fort Polk, the last 9 weeks there, next Fort Benning, Georgia. I got married. I was in 4th Platoon with 2 of my good friends there who gained weight. Chair and Landry. Why? Because they sat with me and they knew I didn't eat ham, pork, or whatever else. So they had the ham and the pork. We had the OCS, we got a break during Christmas of that year where we all got out. I called my wife from Fort Polk. It was in September, I think. I said, hey, Beth, we got to get married. This is the date. The mother and her planned the wedding for December of '68. So as you can probably figure out, we've been married 50 years. So we got married, went on honeymoon, came back on a Saturday night, left her Sunday morning, and came back to hell in Fort Benning. Okay, we graduate. Just before we're graduating, they come around, they said, who wants to go indefinite? We'll guarantee a year in Hawaii or a year in Germany. I said, really? So, buddies and some friends of mine. I said, why don't you come to Germany with us? And I said, what are you, nuts? You're going to be on that Russian border guarding it for 11 months. I'm going to Hawaii. What could possibly go wrong in Hawaii? I want to learn to surf. So 7 of us went to Hawaii. I said, we got Dean went to Hawaii, I went to Hawaii, Harvey Cook went to Hawaii, and I just read the book, somebody else went to Hawaii. I'm in Hawaii. What do in the Army? I've got a platoon. I was in charge of the 4 mess halls we had. While you guys were calling in airstrikes, I was calling in water buckets, fighting forest fires in the middle of the mountain ranges in Hawaii. The Army issued me contact lenses. Fine, great. On November the 13th, which happened to be on a Friday, I go into the office. That morning, I lost the contact lens. Colonel comes in. He says, "Hey, Alan, guess what?" I said, "What?" He said, "I got a telex down." He goes, "You're going to my old unit." And me, I said, "Which country is that one?" He goes, "You're going to MAC-B in Vietnam. You got to go back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for 6 weeks of a Matterports course." I said, "Fine." He says, "Go home." He says, "Take the rest of the day off. Don't tell your wife." I walk in. She goes, "You got to rest in Vietnam." I said, "Wow, that's perception. Somebody call you?" She was there. So anyway, got out of Hawaii. Great time in Hawaii. I learned to surf, drank a lot, we partied a lot. We had the 25th came back, the 1st Unit Division, they came back. I told my colonel, I said, "You got to get these guys discharged. You can't leave them here. They're going to destroy the place." They destroyed the place. All I was doing in Hawaii with my platoon, it was payday. What would I do? I had to get calls from Shore Patrol. "We got so-and-so here. Please come and get him." Well, I had a Fiat Spider, a convertible. One of my guys was 6'4". I stuffed his body into that thing and drove him back. Anyway, where is that going? Okay, so we go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for temporary 6 weeks. I'm carrying my medical records. Oh, my assignment, this is good, the Army, MAC-V assignment. It says no assignment requiring binocular vision. And I think about it. I need my eyes. So, what do? I go to see this doctor. He just came on active duty as a captain. We start talking. He was in Hawaii, graduated from the University of Hawaii. He looks, he says, "Oh, you got a little double vision in the right eye." I said, "Yeah, but I'm left eye dominant and left hand." He says, "How would you like to get out of the Army?" I said, "Out of the Army? Why don't we try getting off orders in Vietnam first?" He said, "Wow, let's go in order here." You know, he goes, "Okay." So he signs this thing. It says, "No hazardous duty assignment in Vietnam." And I still have a copy of it. It gets signed by 3 docs there. They then, it has to go up to the Pentagon. So they tell me, "Go copy your medical records." I said, "Oh, wow, copy machine." Okay. So I copied what I said I had double vision. Goes up to the Pentagon. And I'm in a class with captains and majors, a first lieutenant, going back for their 2nd and 3rd tour. And I said, "How can I be so lucky to be in this class?" You go for the 1st tour. Sergeant Major wants to see it. Go out, he goes, "Lieutenant, your orders are canceled in Vietnam." You know, I had a baby at that time. Michelle was just born. I said, "Oh, hallelujah. Where you got me going?" He says, "We got you going in Fort Polk, Louisiana." I said, "Are you kidding me?" "No, that's it." So I got on the phone, called up the officer's assignment branch. He said, "Hey, you got me off orders to Vietnam. You got Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort Ord, California. I don't care where, Fort Dix, New Jersey, but not Fort Polk." He says, "We got Vietnam, we have Korea, we have Fort Polk." I said, "I'll take Fort Polk." So what do? We get the Fort Polk, and my wife never can imagine. We know the Deep South. That was an eye-opener for her. Anyway, we get to Fort Polk. Assignment branch says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "What do I want to do? I want to do a basic training company." So the assignment is the next sort of a basic training company. That was an experience. Anyway, then I ended up with S4 building a golf driving range for the trainees. I said, "Are they ever going to use this thing?" Okay. Anyway, it was coming up for 3 years. I said, I got to get out of here. I can't press my luck any farther here. So anyway, I was able to get out. I made sure it was, looking back, if you went less than 3 years, you had a reserve component. I said, I'm going over 3. So it was like 3 years, 26 days, and 10 hours. I can tell you exactly. And got out of the Army in 71. Pure luck. That's all I can say. But I was extremely fortunate that, I don't know, you can say the stars were aligned or who knows what, but absolutely pure luck on that. So what are you going to get out of the Army? No one was hiring us. Didn't matter where you served. They would ask me, why did you make Dean's List in college? I said, that was 3 years ago. Anyway, started in the nursing home field. And for the last, was doing it for 43 years. For the last 30 years, I worked for Hartford Hospital, major hospital, running their subacute, post-acute, terminal care, long-term care, dementia care, put on additions, built buildings, independent assisted living complexes. Did that for 30 years, and why I got out, people ask me, very simple. When you're in your 30s and 40s and you see people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, you say, oh, that's down the road somewhere, okay? But when you're in your 60s, and I didn't mind my friends, I told you this, I didn't mind my friends coming in for a shoulder replacement, hips, knees, they ran, they played ball, they had whatever. I said, but when they started coming in for terminal care, I said, that's it. And I had 3 friends within a year and a half, 2 of my cycling buddies and one of his wives. They died in my facility. I said, I'm out of here. So my staff goes, oh, you can't leave, you can't leave. I said, well, they go, wait till we retire. I said, are you crazy? I'll be in a wheelchair. We're going through the rooms while you're just going to retire. So anyway, that's my story. OCS was a life-changing experience. Being in the Army was a life-changing experience. Along the way, my undergraduate was in business, master's degree was in organizational behavior. We traveled, we got the wall. And I've been retired since, 6 years in October, Steve. Okay. That's it, guys.
Hello, I'm Dean Kuchera, and presently live in Kierberg, Florida. I was from Nebraska, got drafted. Never seen an ocean before. Got to this side here, but went to OCS, and I think the big thing was I met Claudette through a blind date, and after OCS, everything I wanted to do was to stick around Fort Benning, Georgia. And so I went to Ranger School, went to jump school. I was one of the guys that went to Scout Going School. And I kept thinking, if I keep going to these schools, the war will get over and I'll get to go back to Nebraska. But that never happened. I went to Vietnam, and the first 6 months there was with the 199th, and they deactivated. It was a 49th platoon Scout Dog, and then I went up to July, happened to be same unit with Brian Landry, although he was infantry, and I had the 57th platoon Scout Dog, and it was good duty. Dodged a lot of the pain and suffering that some of you guys had at being line platoon leaders. It was a blessing to come back and be all in one piece. And, came back and we moved to Florida because that's where Claudette was from. And I've been in the insurance business, franchising banks to write insurance. I started an agency there, had probably about 1,000 banks that wrote underneath us. Me and 9 other guys, we started a bank and then had a real estate company. So we really, have been blessed coming back in one piece. But what I really wanted to talk about and be serious about is about this group. I don't think I've ever felt closer to more people that maybe I haven't seen in such a long time. Some of you I don't know well, but I meet you. It's like we're brothers, and it's an honor. But everybody had a choice to go to OCS. It wasn't voluntary. It's a choice, and you went through it and you did it, and you were blessed by being here. Who would have ever thought 50 years? There's another choice, and my favorite saying is eternity is a long time to be wrong. And those who do not know Jesus Christ, you're facing another choice. If you know Him, we'll be in eternity together. If you don't, it's a sad outcome. for those who don't believe, if you're wrong and I'm right, you're still wrong. If I'm wrong, well, we're both wrong. But I don't think I'm wrong. Obviously. So I got Russ to back me up. But it's my obligation as a Christian to praise the Lord and tell you about it. So I hope that we'll all meet someday.
I'm Chris Beck. I was a military brat. My dad was Corps of Engineers. Spent 2 years in college and always wanted to become an officer like my dad. So 2 years, went and took the exams, went to Fort Leonard Wood. Like, I'm surprised how many of you guys went to Fort Leonard Wood. And just before we were supposed to go, they come in and say, hey, you got a choice. Go to Vietnam as a enlisted person or go to Fort Benning, be in the infantry. Deep down, I really wanted to be an infantry officer, although my dad was Corps of Engineers. That was the hardest thing to tell my mom. She didn't take it very well, but my dad did. So ended up going to Benning. Tried to have as low profile as possible. I'm surprised Lynn even remembers me because we were in first platoon together. Bob Bennett and I stayed in our room and kept our mouths shut. Just tried to get through. They came around as we're getting ready to graduate, and the scout dog people came and said, hey, would you want to be in scout dogs? Why? He said, the only bad thing is you have to go to Ranger School. I'll go. So, went to Ranger School right after OCS. I actually gained 2 pounds at Ranger School.
No way.
Yeah, I gained 2 pounds. Went in and harassed my CO at Scout Dog School, said, look, I want to go to jump school or Vietnam. Just send me. Came in the day after Veterans Day. CO said, you got good news, bad news. I said, well, what's the bad news? He says, here's your orders to jump school. I said, well, that's great news. He said, no, here's your orders to Vietnam. So I think I was probably the first one in Vietnam. I got there December 12th of '69.
Wow.
I put a guy, one of my buddies in Scout Dog School, I put him on the airplane. He went home on leave. I cleared post in 2 days. Most of you took 2 weeks. I stood there and got shots in both arms. Just, I was waiting for him in Tonsanuk when he got off the airplane. He's like, what's going on? Well, I spent 18 months in Vietnam. Came back, I went to Fort Polk. I liked it there. I was a bachelor. I found a way to meet females. I would go down to the hospital and introduce myself to all the new nurses who came in. And then the commanding general told all the company commanders they had to go visit their people in the hospital. So that dried up. So then I started walking around through all the offices with the manila folder, meeting all the secretaries. Well, I got hit by the rift in '73. I was flying out of Louisiana. Everything stops in Atlanta. And I was waiting for my plane to Pittsburgh, and there sat this little Navy ensign. I walked up to her, started talking to her, found out where she was sitting, went up, changed my seat, sat. There was an old lady sitting between us. Old, she was probably 45. And we started talking, and after we got up to, we could take the seatbelts off, she said, do you two want to sit together? That'd be nice. So we sat together, talked all the way to Pittsburgh. She was stationed in Orlando. I was going to Orlando to get a job. But was going to Pittsburgh to see the family first. And As we're getting off the airplane, she gave me her calling card. She said, here, if you're ever in Orlando, look me up. Okay. So I tried calling her, telling her that I was coming to Orlando. I finally called the hospital, and I said, this is Captain Benton. I want to speak to Edson Gale. Now, I got all the respect I thought I deserved from the Navy, because they thought I was an 06 captain. Well, went down to Orlando, got in touch with her, started dating, and I asked her to marry me one year. She said yes the next year. I asked her in 73 and she said yes in 74. Although it was midnight, but it took her a whole minute to decide. Went back to school, got a degree in accounting, became a CPA. My wife's a Navy nurse. She retired from the Navy after 29 and a half years. We traveled all over the East Coast, went to Spain. I have a business, or had a business, doing taxes for about 200-300 people that we knew in the Navy. Plus I taught college. I just retired about 5 years ago from Oglethorpe University, where I was head of the accounting department at Oglethorpe, a small liberal arts college in Atlanta. My claim to fame there is we would graduate anywhere between 10 to 15 students every year. For the 13 years I was there, every student had a job when they graduated. Most of them were making more money than the English professors, psychology professors were making. So I was known as he who cannot be named. I was definitely the black sheep of the organization. The time I spent with you gentlemen was probably the most remarkable time of my life. I don't know how we did it. We went through some hellacious times, but everybody helped everybody out. And I'm just proud to be a member of this organization.
Most of us, I got drafted, sort of.
Can't hear you. We got to hear you.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay, I'll get closer here.
My name's Stephen Hollis, and I, like most of you, got drafted. Before I begin that, I want to thank Lynn, and I want to thank Jones's father, because if it wasn't for him, we could still be cleaning barracks at Fort Benning. I graduated from high school in 1964 in Frankfurt, Germany, an American high school there. And spent a year traveling around Europe, and then I went to a military academy, got a 2-year degree. And I got out and I went to school in Missouri and started parties because at the military academy we couldn't bring smoke or anything. So when we got out, we wanted to try all of that. And I tried it to the point where I had to leave the school. Okay? And my folks at the time were nice enough to leave Europe. You know, when you're in Europe, you're in draft board number 100.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you for a second. There's a hum. Oh, okay. When you stepped away, it stopped.
Okay.
I don't know if it's touch these buttons or what.
Yeah.
But let's try just moving a little bit.
Okay. How's that? All right. So my parents were determined at that time to move back to the States. And in Europe, if you were in local board number 100, they didn't draft anybody, okay? Because if they drafted you, they had to send you back to the States to take your physical, okay? And then they had to wait to draft you. But my folks, right at the time that I flunked out of the school that I was in and had to go back to Long Island, decided they were moving to Long Island, okay? So I was now in local board number 1 which for all of you is my estimation is local board number 10. So they didn't wait too long. It was a bedroom community out there. They needed folks. It was right after 10. And so I got drafted and sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And then I got sent to Fort Lost in the Woods, like most of the rest of you. And I was also told that I was going to go to engineer OCS until the very end, and then they gave me the same choice as the rest of you. They were pretty inventive there. They gave a lot of different reasons for the same thing, you know. And then they told me, but don't worry about it because it says you're going to be an engineer according to the needs of the Army, okay? Even though you're going to Fort Benning. Somebody gave me the routine that they sent people to Fort Benning to get infantry training because engineer units lots of times got converted into infantry when necessary, and therefore, you know, they needed somebody in the unit that knew infantry tactics. You know? So that was BS of mine. So I got to Benning, and I too learned a lot. I think two major things. I learned teamwork, working with people. You help each other out. You know, we had that saying, you know, was it cooperate, graduate, or you know, to work with each other. I learned that you can always do more than you think you can do if you just, you know, put that one foot in front of the other foot. So I applied for it and was accepted in flight school. Went to Fort Polk. We went in the BOQ, and then Ozzy and Osborne. Then we always called him Ozzy, but Osborne and myself and Jack Bloom decided that since there was no air conditioning, we couldn't sleep. We'd get a trailer off post. So the three of us started the room together, and we did that when we were in flight school too. And so we went from there. We had there was a lady up at DA, by the way, that kept track. You know, when you were going to go to flight school. So we had a roster at Fort Polk of all the guys who were going to flight school, and they call her once a week, okay, and find out when are we going to flight school, when are we going to Polk. Finally, the word came down from the general's office that we would not call her again, or we would all be going to Vietnam immediately. So we went from there to Walters, and I was, for some reason, I was unable to fully auto-rotate, okay? And they required you to hover the aircraft, right, as part of your training. And since I couldn't do that, I got boarded out with the first, was it 34 folks that they boarded out. They usually would recycle you, you know, and let you try that again, you know, and if you fail the second time, then you're grounded. But they didn't need as many pilots because the Vietnam War started to wind down. So when I called the branch and so forth, the major gave me a hard time and everything, but then he told me, wow, you must have known that we aren't sending any more second lieutenants to Vietnam. You can go to Turkey, you can go to Italy, or you can go to Germany. And I said, Germany. And he said, and we're going to send you to Red Eye School at Fort Bliss. So I figured since I couldn't fly them, they wanted me to shoot them down. So I went to Bliss, and then when I was at Bliss, I met a fellow there who was an AG when I was reporting in, and he was a fellow graduate of Frankfurt High School, and he was a lieutenant there. And 3 weeks into the program, he called me and he said, Terry, he says, I got 4 slots for Berlin. One of them's AG, that's mine. And he said, 3 of them are infantry, do you want one of them? I said, hell yes. And so I went to Berlin. That was an assignment in Berlin. The Army was like it was in the books. And you had all the support that you wanted and needed. I was a number of things there. I was a Red Eye section leader, I was a rifle platoon leader, I was a company XO, and I was the battalion S2 officer. I was officer of the guard at Spandau Prison, where Rudolf Hess was, for Christmas to New Year's. That's another thing that the Soviets got us on. You know, they didn't celebrate Christmas, but we had guard for December. Okay, I don't know how I ended up with that, but so it was a great assignment. Then I got assigned on the first number of officers out of Berlin to Korea. I went to Korea to the DMZ. We were the last American battalion on the DMZ, 1st Battalion, 17th Infantry. And stuff happened every day there. That was a good unit and a good assignment. And so I got out. I was also in the 73 draft. I was back at Fort Jackson. And then I went back to school, got my degree, my full degree, and worked in the reserves, worked in the national, the guard, and then at one time I got a job with, and it was good that I followed you with the accounting business, because I got a job with the IRS. So we used to work with the accounting people real closely. And so I retired from that a couple years ago, and ever since. And during in that time, I met my wife, who at a certain time in our life, she saved me. So, and I appreciate it.
Go. First of all, thanks to this good man over here and his good wife, Pearl. Her name may be Pearl, but she's a diamond. That's for sure. I'm Reed Simmons. Grew up in a town called Logan, Utah. Went to school there. Graduated high school in '61. So I'm one of the old guys here. And I'm glad we're going maybe 3 years now, so I won't be 81, I'll be at least under 80. But first of all, appreciate all of you good men. It was a privilege to be in OCS with you, to see what's happened in your lives. Great things. I salute you. I really do. Appreciate you. Love you. Back to the story. I'll be quick, Kathy. Graduated in '61 from high school, went to Utah State for 1 year. After that, I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Minnesota for 2 years. Came back, went to school, draft board, kept track of you really well. When they knew I was due for graduation in '68, they said, we're coming to get you. So I had my notice. At that point in time, like many of you, we had the college option plan, guaranteed OCS if you're a college graduate. Went to Fort Dix for basic training. They found out at Fort Dix there were a number of college guys were staying there. They were doing AIT training there, which was not jungle qualified. So the college guys were kind of smart. They said, okay, if you're not jungle qualified, I'll go through AIT, drop out of the OCS program, get shipped to Germany, which was happening. With the group of us that were there, they picked us up and flew us to Fort Polk as soon as the basic was over. Lined us up in a, what it was, 727, one that had the rear up and back to the side. I remember marching up that thing and flying to Fort Polk. Spent Fort Polk AIT, then went, of course, to OCS in Fort Benning. At completion of OCS, a couple weeks before the end, Lieutenant Spay said, put you in for a TAC officer. I said, oh, thanks a lot. Mike Long and I ended up being TAC officers for a National Guard unit, and they did 12 weeks, and then we, of course, started with other groups. We had the unfortunate experience with the National Guard during a live fire exercise. We lost one of those candidates, was shot and killed out on the range. And that was quite a blow for not only that group of young men that were doing that, but also kind of slowed us down for a few days as far as training and other things. On completion of being a TAC officer, I went from, that was the 61st, I went to the 50, is that correct? Or am I reversing? Reversing, 51st, and then I went to 60. And went to Vietnam, got orders for Vietnam to go in March. Went home. I had about 6 weeks before I was supposed to report in country. Sat and waited for additional orders. What go? Never came, never came, never came. Finally, I called them up and I said, I'm supposed to have orders to go the end of March to Vietnam. And they said, oops. And they got them to me quickly, and so I headed off to Vietnam. The strange aspect, and I look at it as a blessing in regards to going to Vietnam, is I flew out of Travis into Saigon and had that short course that they give you there for jungle experience and such. And then they shipped me north to I Corps, which was very rare. If you went into the South Country, you usually stayed south down in the Paddies in that area. I was fortunate enough to go north. I ended up as a platoon leader with 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry, which is the old guard, the fighting part of the old guard. 11th Brigade out of Duckfall, which was the Americal Division. And fortunately, worked in the mountains all the time. You can hide well in the mountains. And so I had that experience there with them. Served that for some months, and then was made the S1 of the battalion, and served that. That was a good job, but it was also a sad job because I got to write the letters for the colonel for all those that were killed in action. Did not enjoy that at all. But I cannot look back at all and say anything bad about the experience I had in Vietnam, because I think it helped me in my own life and the experiences that you face as you go on. Came home from Vietnam. My wife was working in California at the time, and I didn't have a job. I was at church one day, and someone asked me, or on one Sunday, and asked me, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm looking for work. I interviewed some oil companies and some other things. He says, they're looking for someone in my field. And I said, what's that? And he said, pharmaceutical sales. And I said, what's that? So I ended up being a drug pusher for almost 40 years, both in sales and sales management. And retired in 08, everything was sort of closing down. I turned 65, they decided to disband my division that I was working in. So I took retirement, did that for the last, how many years that is now? 11. Been retired. My wife and I did serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Iowa for a year, taking care of young men. I had the responsibility for cars. They call you the car czar and such. So had that experience. So that's a short brief, hopefully for everybody. Thank you to all of you.
It's good to be here. We have been to one of these. We were in Las Vegas. And enjoyed that. I graduated from high school in 1961. Sounds like Reed and I were almost twins on that. Went to Utah State for a year and then went on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to California. And I didn't even have to learn a new language. We went for 2 years and then came back and went to continue my education at Utah State. I have a degree in zoology, which I don't know what it qualifies me for to do, but and 6 days after I graduated, I got an invitation from Uncle Sam, and then went to the board and said I was interested in OCS, and realized that I could do that with my education, and was on the path of engineer at OCS, and went to Fort Dix and met Simmons, and we had a good time at Fort Dix. Went then to Fort Leonard, Missouri, and that's where we. I was listening to someone else talking about their stories at Fort Leonard and being in the. You had to put all your clothes in your. What was it?
Barracks bag?
Yeah, you.
Double check.
And push it across the river. With just your underwear on. And that was quite an experience. And, I didn't know if I wanted to be an engineer after that or not. Anyway, we got a choice. My choice was we don't have an engineer OCS class date for 6 months. You have a choice. You can stay here at Leonard Wood as a E5 as part of the cadre, or you can go to infantry school. They have a class date just coming up. And so I said, well, I don't want to wait 6 months here, so I guess I'm going to go to infantry OCS. And that was a very good choice, I think. But I did have a choice. And so we got, I was married at the time. My wife was, I think we married for about 9 months. We got married in '67, September, graduated in June. And so I headed off for my military experience, and she stayed at home. We started at vetting in November, had a short period of time for Christmas. I went home and brought my wife back. And she was working for the Air Force ROTC, Utah State. And when she got here at vetting, she got a job with a brigade commander, our brigade commander. And when Lieutenant Fleming found that out, he was kind of upset because I revealed to her some things that were going on, and she told the brigade commander, and that wasn't a good idea. So I and Lieutenant Fleming had in fact, he put his recommendation in that I would be a TAC officer as well after OCS. I had a choice, and the choice was, of course, Germany or Hawaii. If you gave them another year, you had to go volunteer indefinite. And
So I found out that I was on orders for TAC officer, and I says, well, that's not my favorite place to be, and so we chose to go to Hawaii. And I was supposed to be there for 16 months, guaranteed, and 13 months I had orders for Vietnam. I called whoever you're supposed to call and asked him about that, and he says, oh, we're sorry. So we were off for Vietnam, and I ended up with the 1st and 52nd in the American Division. We were in July with a fire base out at Elsie Stinson, and I had made first lieutenant by the time I got there, and so I wasn't a butter bar. And so my platoon thought I was experienced. I turned the platoon over to my platoon sergeant, and he did a great job keeping me out of trouble. We, after 6 days I was in Vietnam, we had a company experience out in the bush, and it was Sunday, and so the chaplain was there, and we had the full company was together. It got late. The chaplain, which is not supposed to stay out in the field, stayed, and there was a first platoon was going to be their security for the CP, and they went on top of a hill, and it was, we think it was a 155. It was set up on there, and the chaplain was killed. The company commander was killed, and so was the lieutenant, artillery lieutenant, was killed. The first platoon leader was wounded. We got into Stars and Stripes with that little action because it was later in the Vietnam experience. So I and the 3rd platoon leader, he was a first lieutenant as well. But he'd been there longer, so he became the company commander for a period of time. He was later killed, so I was the only one that wasn't killed or wounded. I felt pretty lucky at that. So I think they must have felt, the battalion must have felt sorry for me, and maybe the headquarters commander, along with that, I was made a captain. And so I was kind of back in the rear and at July, and it was a great experience to be involved in that. So I had a bunch of hooch mates, and we caught them one day bringing in heroin. A can like this, about that, heroin, and giving it to the troops, or selling it to the troops. That was an eye-opener to me, and it made me concerned about what was happening to these young men that were there in the Henley Company. Wondered how and what happened to them when they got home. Tried to police that a little bit, had some experiences with that. Came back from Vietnam, was assigned to Fort Carson, and was in the S1 assignment there. Left Fort Carson, stayed there for a little while. We loved Colorado Springs, and really enjoyed that assignment. left the Army and we wanted to get back to Utah. And so we found a job over there as a stockbroker. Did a lot of municipal bonds for high net worth people. Then they started calling us financial advisors. So I was a financial advisor for 35 years. Just retired a couple of years ago, but enjoyed totally the experience in OCS and the military. I didn't have any of the symptoms of concern about what was going on there because it was a job. I'd been trained for the job, do it. And I can tell from your response that you did it. And I applaud you and thank you for a great example you are. Thanks.
I want to change the pace a little bit. I'm not going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about us. I think you've all read or heard enough of our war stories. I can change the pace a little bit and do something I think that's perhaps a little bit more meaningful than my war stories of what I did during my time in the service. For the past 4 days, we've been laughing and joking and poking fun at each other, and even got to watch Lynn catch flies. We found that we had a new graduate from the course that we didn't know by the name of Joe Gordon. Lynn introduced us. We spent 10 minutes trying to figure out who Gordon was. We're talking about Gorman, not Gordon.
He looks a lot like me.
But more important than all that laughing and joking and poking fun at each other, I think, is that we spent time reminiscing and sharing our military experiences with one another, very personal experiences. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to put some context to what those military experiences were, and try to give it all a deeper meaning, because it's more than just your experience and my experience. It all comes together, and it's a lot more than just individuals. 50 years ago today, we graduated, put on our lieutenant bars, our gold bars, our cross rifles, and spread out across the country, across the world, to serve our country. The operative words being to serve our country. And whether it was for 3 years or 30 years, or whether we went to Vietnam, or Korea, or Germany, or stayed stateside, we all became part of a select group, I would say an elite group of Americans, dating back to the American Revolution, through 2 world wars and numerous conflicts, to the men and women serving today in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the other hellholes around the world. We were the people who stood up, stepped forward, and answered the call when our country needed us. I, for one, am very proud of my service, and I sure hope that every one of you feels the same way, because what you did is special. What we did is special. And although we didn't receive the recognition back then, we deserve to feel proud for what we did, for being there for our country when our country needed us. A couple of years ago, I decided to take that pride I feel inside and put it on display. And I have on the front door of my house 2 plaques, one on the outside and one on the inside.
to commemorate that pride of service that hopefully we all feel. The plaque on the front is a 2x4, 2x5 inch little plaque in bronze, and it has a quote on it, and I don't remember the source, but it says, "Freedom has a taste for those who fought and almost died, that the protected will never know." That saying struck a chord, and I put it on this plaque and put it on the front door. And I try to remember that we are the lucky ones. We are the ones who came back. We're the ones who understand what that word freedom means, because we saw the flip side of that coin, oppression, and we know exactly what that looks like. And so we have a right to be proud to be Americans, proud of our country, and proud for what we did when our country needed us. We know what it means to be an American. And I hope that generations to come will not forget that, and will keep that flame alive that the Founding Fathers gave us. Because it is an ideal that is unparalleled in human history, and is something that we should never forget, never let expire, and never be forgotten. Unfortunately, not all of us came back. We have 7 beloved brothers that weren't able to come to this reunion because they made the ultimate sacrifice. Roy and I went to visit them in DC last September. And as we stood in front of each nameplate, we remembered them, we honored them, and we promised that we would never forget them for what they did and what they represent. I said I had 2 plaques on my door. The plaque on the inside is an 8x10 plaque etched in silver letters with a shiny black background. And it's a prayer. And it's a prayer I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, have heard. But I want to recite it for you one time in honor and remembrance of Bob, Bill, Ron, Viral, Donnie, Harvey, and Morris. It's called the Soldier's Prayer, and I'm sure you've heard it, but please bear with me. And if I can't make it through it, just wait a second. The Soldier's Prayer. I was that which others did not want to be. I went where others feared to go, and did what others failed to do. I asked nothing of those who did nothing, and reluctantly accepted the thought of eternal loneliness should I fail. I have seen the face of terror, felt the cold of fear, and enjoyed the sweet taste of a moment's love. I have cried, pained, and hoped. But most of all, I have lived times others would say are best forgotten. at least today, I am able to say that I am proud of what I was, a soldier. The Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we'll all be together again in 3 years in D.C., the most appropriate place, because that's where our brother soldiers, many of them, lie resting in peace at Arlington. But because nothing in this life is certain and no one has been guaranteed tomorrow, I would like to finish my words tonight with one more prayer. It's one of the many Celtic prayers, and I'm sure most of you have heard all of it or part of it. And it reads, "May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you, and God bless America."
Roy Pironi from Allentown, Pennsylvania. And like many of you, the usual, graduated from Penn State, 68, Fort Dix, basic AIT, joined you, wonderful young man, and graduated in 69. Lucky, went to DLI language school, learned how to speak German. And guess what? Went to Germany. Amazing, right? Became an S5. For the ladies that don't know what that is, that's called community relations. So I community related for a couple of years. Got orders for MACV. I came home to the CONUS and got the pink slip. 72 hours and became a civilian. So, what do you do now? Get a job. Meet a girl, get married, have a family. Sold building products for almost 50 years and retired 2 years ago. Thank you.
I have to move the microphone a little short, guy. I'm Dave Hammond, lucky to have graduated from high school, found a college that whose standards were low enough to meet mine, managed to wiggle my way through there, actually improved my grades. Decided I'd go to Michigan State and get a master's degree. Yeah, that didn't work so good. I had the good fortune to meet my future wife. We had a great time. Neither of us graduated. The draft board was looking at me heavily based on my size. I'm pretty sure I didn't want to be a tunnel rat, so I volunteered for the OCS college op. A lot of folks did. Went to Fort Dix only for a little while. Went to Fort Knox for basic training. Got to Fort Polk at 3 o'clock in the morning. The leader of our bus group, which was whoever it was, showed up, went up to the second floor of a type, was it K or A building, and you hear with the windows open because there was no air conditioning, what are you doing here? Who the are you? And he just handed them no orders. Unexpected we were. So then we got called upstairs and said, okay, you want to change your college job, you can be a truck driver, you can start tomorrow. No. So, you know, I said, okay, I still want to be a college job. So we had a 0 week at Fort Polk. Cleaned a lot of garbage cans, scrubbed a lot of dishes, you know, went on. Called my future wife at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, I'm still going to go to OCS. She said, who is this? I said, why the hell are you calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning? So, went through Fort Polk, continued to call my wife at 4 o'clock in the morning when I got off fire guard because the buildings there were, you know, burned down in 2 seconds. Went to OCS, had a great time.
It was super. Did a lot of great things. Spent a lot of time with folks that are still friends. Along with a couple of other guys, got to Fort Lewis. And then with another group of guys like Joe and myself, and went to Korea. Oh, okay, we're going to Korea. I guess we're not going to Vietnam. So we get there, and there's nobody there. I mean, we're it. Surprisingly enough, most things that hit the Pacific did not go to Korea. So, talked to my wife when that tour was over, said, let's go to Germany. So, went to Germany for a couple of years. You know, I guess we're going to stay in. I went through the normal procedure, IOAC, back to Korea, Germany, Fort Lewis, wound up in Germany and decided, we got 2 kids in college, so we can go back to the States and look for jobs and pay for the kids in school, or we can stay. So I did 18 years in Germany as a defense contractor, multiple companies, same telephone number, same desk, same uniform, shirt and tie, and had a great time. So retired in 11, went to Fort Retirement in Palm Coast, Florida, where there's no taxes. You know, some of you have made other elections. However, I'm very active. I decided that there was something to do in retirement. I'm currently the commander of a American Legion post in Palm Coast. Never got a battalion command, so this is it. You know, got a bunch of volunteers where if you piss them off, they leave. So you gotta be nice. Also in the Military Officers Association and the VFW. I would tell you that this is a non-paid commercial based on everything that's going on. If you have the opportunity to join one of those organizations and pay whatever your annual dues are, there's only about 6 organizations of enough strength and fortitude to talk to Congress and support what veterans need to do. A big one is MOAA, American Legion, VFW. A lot of these other organizations are good for troops. They don't have the place, they don't have the back, you know, the procedures to try to support veterans with Congress. If you don't talk to Congress, or if you're not a big organization, they don't pay any attention to you. So if you have some time or some money, just make some contributions, and I would applaud you to do that. We need the help. Thank you, sir. Thank your bride for all the great things you do. Look forward to seeing you in 3 years in D.C. Carry on.
For Lynn over here, you kept badgering me on the email. Are you going to come? You coming? You coming? Just through the years, I just couldn't get here. It was family, it was work, and the other kind of stuff. But now that I'm fully retired, I have been actually since 2015. My wife kept urging me about going to it, and I said, I don't know if I want to do that or not. But then I finally decided, yes, I need to do that because I haven't seen you guys in 50 years. With the exception of one guy here in the office, Terrence Foley in the back there, he and I attended IOAC in 1975-76, and I kept looking at him thinking, you know, I've seen that guy before. And I finally asked him the question, and we started matching up on things that happened here at Fort Benning. Basically, I started out as enlisted, spent 3 years enlisted, then got an opportunity because I was an E5. Not quite sure how I managed that. But anyway, I ended up at Fort Benning, and I was kind of intimidated by the college guys. I really was. I thought, wow, they're a lot smarter than I am, until we got out in the field, and I went, okay, we're on the same level. So anyway, we graduated, and I ended up and did not realize that the guys in the back there were probably in the same 29th Hawaiian Brigade that I was. It was a National Guard brigade that had been activated while the 25th left. One of the best assignments I ever had. Good bunch of people, all local boys. And then the 25th and I think the 9th Infantry disbanded, and they brought back one of the brigades to Hawaii with 30% of the brigade with 120 days or less. Okay, now envision this, these really happy soldiers coming back from Vietnam, knowing they had to spend 120 days stateside. I had a platoon that was pretty rowdy. My squad leader actually ended up robbing a store. We had burglaries, we had rapes, we had shootings. One of the lieutenants was stuffed in a foot locker, a wall locker, and thrown off the second floor from the Quonset. So it was pretty bad. But being the smart guy that I was, and married to my first wife, I made the decision I needed to go to Vietnam and I needed to get away from my wife. So I ended up in Vietnam. I was going to MI. I was actually, when I first went in, I was MI. And I got my commission. And because I had my commission, I should say my security clearance at the TS level, based on SCI, I ended up at an MI post up in Phu Bai, which was a SIGINT installation. Great tour duty. I was replacing a first lieutenant as the headquarters company commander, but the first month I was there, I was the provost marshal. Now figure that one out. So the second command I had was as the headquarters company commander. The first sergeant hugged me as the first lieutenant left and I took command of it. He was a infantry sergeant. I was a infantry officer on a SIGINT unit. So I had about 6 months there, and then I became the S3, and then I got walking papers in March of '72. So being the smart guy that I was, and really ticked off at the Army for kicking me out, I went and took the GI Bill, and I got my degree. And I joined the Guard, Texas Guard, and I was with the Texas Guard from 1973 until 1995. But in the interim, I was with the 1st and 141st, whose lineage goes back to the Alamo. I was with them for 7 years, because in the Guard you don't get promoted fast, there are just not enough slots. And basically moved up to the 49th Armored Division, where I served the G2 shop as a deputy G2. And then I went on tour. I was already on tour with the division, but I went on tour, did ROTC duty for 2 years, ended up at Headquarters 3rd Army, Forces Command, and I ended up my career at the Pentagon with a good 20 years. I was very lucky. I was very lucky. There were 3 times when I was in Vietnam I got shot at, and all 3 times I was missed. So I figured that God had a reason for me to stick around. I've been married to my beautiful bride over here for about 15 years, and I have a good life. We travel, we get to see people, and I'm really glad I came. Thanks.
Stand up so we can see you.
We still have to do that. Do we still have to give a toast? I read that thing.
I know.
Is that going to happen?
I don't know.
I do. One of the communications I had with him, he said to prepare for a toast. And I had all these thoughts in my mind. And I knew the obvious one would be chosen by some other people. But I knew there was one toast that nobody would think of. All you guys that are 5'9" or taller remain seated. I want to thank you for all the honors you won us in marching and the parades, and the practice that you had to do for them. But what were we now? In mini platoon, on your feet. We were the forgotten few. While these guys were out marching, we were buffing the bit. When you guys had that beautiful parade, the general was there and all that. I missed that. I didn't get to see your dad, Joe. We were busy buffing the hall for this reception. And my toast is to the mini platoon. And it all came back to me tonight when we're taking that picture. You and I are together again. No short guy. Anyway. The word that kept coming up was choices. Choices. And I think that for all of us, no matter what we ended up doing in our lives, we can go back and find a couple forks in the road where a choice taken changed our whole lives. And we all talk about the getting drafted. But at any rate, I had been teaching, I graduated middle of the year, yeah, because I had to spend an extra semester. But anyway, I graduated in January, so I went back to my hometown, I had a job, and then I had this coaching offer at another school. Well, I ended up taking it, so I was assistant football and head wrestling, assistant track. So I went to my draft board lady to find out, and she said, well, as long as you stay in Potawatomi County, you'll be protected as, you know, whatever it is, essential personnel or something. But if you leave the draft board, I can't promise you won't be drafted. Okay. So I took this job, and I got 1 year in. And in the spring, I got my draft notice. She was true to her word. And so I got 1 year of coaching in. And so then, of course, I did what many of you did. I enlisted. And we went down the same road. And from Fort Dix, went to Fort Polk. And then we ended up here together. But I think of all the little things, the little changes out. I've always told my kids that sometimes the things you think are bad end up being good, and you really never know the future until you have to make up your mind, go with it, and see how things work out. But these little things, sometimes the things we think are bad end up being good. Well, I got drafted, and I've always told anybody to listen to me. If I hadn't gotten drafted, I'd never met my wife, which is the truth. But I wouldn't have met her. I was at the other thing I always tell kids, anybody that'll listen to me, never pass up a chance for any extra education or training or certification you can get. And there were several of us when we were at Fort Bragg in Special Forces that went for this extra training in psychological operations. And I will never forget 105 degrees when we got off the plane in Vietnam, Tan Son Nhut Air Base, 105 degrees, just Quonset up, and we put our orders down there on the table. I'd been doing all these other things, Special Forces, Airborne, all that, hoping to be something other than an infantry platoon leader in Vietnam, which they just spent $250,000, I think, a soldier is supposed to be in training. Platoon leader, with a life expectancy of 37 days. But anyway, so I put these Durant, I think he told the story last time we were here, but there were about 5 of us, BLAO Durant. We put our orders down there, and the guy was explaining, well, there are no billets in Special Forces, but there's some openings in PsyOps. And while everybody else was saying, what's PsyOps? You know, our orders said, we all had this correspondence school in psychological operations. So that's what I ended up doing. I was in a helicopter from time to time, throwing out Chuhoy leaflets and playing my loudspeaker tapes over the jumble. Don't let anybody ever tell you we wasted our time here. Okay. I never. Probably did. But what of course I forgot what I was trying to say. What I was wanting to go back to is when I was in Fort Bragg, somebody mentioned earlier about calling the Pentagon because they didn't get their orders. Well, there was this guy that was with me in Fort Bragg, and he had put in for this school, combat intelligence for staff officers. And he'd been sitting here in Fort Bragg for quite a while. He was due to be, thought he was going to be going over, so he called to find out what was happening about this school that he put in for. And they said, "What, you're still for?" He was due anyway, so because he called the Pentagon about those orders, they lost him. He was sitting there. He wasn't going to get to go to Vietnam. He was sitting down there at Fort Bragg. But as soon as he made that phone call, he was on his way to Vietnam, and the sergeant said, "Well, somebody's got to take this bill up for this school in Baltimore," so they sent me. And when I was in Fort Hollenberg, I show up there, I ended up in I was getting TDY pay, $23 a day. And I went to the Dundalk YMCA, $3 a day. I was $3 a night, I was paying to stay at the Y. And I was going to classes during the day and everything. And one night, they said, "Well, you know, down at Fort Meade, Officers Club, down in the basement of Fort Meade, they call it Junior Officers Club. And the place is open and soldiers go there. And there were school teachers and secretaries and a lot of, it was just a really good place to go meet people. And I'm only at Fort Hollenberg because this other guy blew it. I'm only going to Fort Meade because somebody meant, "Well, let's go down to Fort Meade tonight." And I walk into this officers club, and there's a table with 6 girls sitting at it. And I went right over to the shortest, the prettiest girl there. But all that point, long point of the story was to tell you that the best thing that ever happened to me was pure chance. I sure didn't figure it out. It wasn't my intelligence, it was chance. But anyway, so we did, right after, we got back in March. I got off the plane March 3rd. She had me an interview with her principal on March 5th. I started teaching March 7th. This is all 1971, and March 27th. So we got married. And then when you wives around there, think about the faith. Somebody back there, Brian, Brian. But anyway, you talk about faith. Here's this woman that's planning a wedding, a pretty good sized wedding actually. And I'm only home for 3 weeks. And she has done all of this work ahead of time with the faith, more faith than I had, that I was coming back. And anyway, so we got married March 27th. And I was fortunate. Nobody ever spit on me or called me a baby killer or any of that kind of stuff. But I was fortunate. I had a good woman, and we raised a family, got busy working, never had a chance to look back. I've never drawn a day of unemployment in my life. I've been blessed, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Gorman, and as a member of the over 5'9" club, all that much, I can't express how happy I am to learn that Ed and David and some of the other ones are not bitter at all. My story is the same as everyone else's as far as, you know, getting drafted, being in the service, somewhat involuntarily at that point. Went to Leonard Wood for basic training, Fort Ord, California for AIT, 93rd Company for OCS, and I went out to Fort Lewis, Washington as a small arms instructor for my first duty assignment. When I was over, I got lucky. I went to Korea with some of the Korean guys, and had a nice assignment, first of the 38th Infantry, started out as Alpha Company Commander. After a couple months became Reconnaissance Platoon Leader. After another 3 or 4 months, I was Headquarters Company Commander. I think it was David that said that when we got there that there wasn't anybody else there, and that was the truth. I'm not sure if I remember what the complement of officers were for a battalion, but we had 6 when I got there. So I was not only a line platoon leader, I was the mess officer, I was a safety officer, I was everything else you could think of. I had 7 or 8 titles. I think it was Dave too said nothing ever came in the line of supplies to Korea because everything was going to Vietnam. Every couple of months we would take up a collection among all the officers, and we'd accumulate a couple $100, and we'd go down to the Eastgate Market in Seoul and buy universal joints for the Jeeps and for the 2.5-ton trucks and whatever, because you could not get those through supply, but you could get them on the black market down in Seoul. After I got out of the service, my first wife and I, Sandy, were divorced. Worked for several civilian companies, one of which was McDonald's Corporation, where I met Marlene. We were both in the IT department, information technology, computer programming, and stuff like that. Stayed there for a few years, eventually worked our way out to Colorado. Marlene's career was 27 years for the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. I was a contractor to the federal government for many years for Ochampus and later TRICARE, processing healthcare claims and that kind of thing. Marlene was military pay support and the programming end of things. So we've kept a connection back to government service for the majority of our civilian lives. We retired in 2015, lived in Florida, working desperately at my golf game and trying to shoot my age before I reach 115. So hopefully I can have those age and score lines cross, hopefully around 80 maybe, I don't know. But we'll continue to do that. But it's my pleasure and honor to serve with all of you. Thank you very much.
In my case, I had, in February of '68, I was my last year of law school. I got a draft notice. They were doing away with deferment. And so like many of you, I, quote, volunteered for this delayed entrance so I could at least finish law school. And went basic in AIT and now to Fort Benning. And my first assignment was at Fort Hood, Texas. One of the unique things, one of the things that was probably very good for me because I was in the 1st Armored Division, and I really had never been inside a APC. I don't know if I ever, in OCS, I even actually went in one. And then I was a platoon leader, these things all over the
fort there. And but about that time, Congress passed a law, Uniform Code of Military Justice, that for the first time, all soldiers who are charged with a crime were entitled to a real lawyer. But prior to that time, the convening authority, whoever it was that was preferring charges, would just grab two people. One would be the defense attorney and one would be the prosecutor. And as soon as the government started supplying real lawyers, they started losing all of their cases. And so they had a bright idea of finding lawyers, even if they hadn't passed the bar. I got drafted, so I wasn't able to take the bar. And so until I went to Korea, tried hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. Just like many of you, Fort Hood, Texas was a place where they dumped people right as they were coming back from Vietnam and before they got out. So it was just a pretty dangerous place, and they were doing terrible things, and not much that the command could do about it. So anyway, I got a lot of experience trying cases, and I got out, however long it was, 2 years, whatever. I got a job with the Office of Chief Counsel, IRS, and worked for them in Los Angeles for about 6.5 years. Got married, and after that time, there was a rule in the Treasury Department that their lawyers could not work in their home state because of conflicts and everything. So that's why I wound up in LA, and they relaxed that rule when I moved back to Georgia. And so working for the federal government, like many of you, my wife didn't have to work because I was able to be in the reserves. Never thought I would have another day in the military. But it had some advantages of you got paid with your government, and you got 2 weeks off, plus you got the military pay. And so that has worked out really well for us and our family. My wife got to stay home with the kids and while they were in school. And so I retired about 11 years ago from the Office of Chief Counsel, and I went to work for Georgia State Law School. They had a low-income taxpayer clinic where students actually represent individuals before the Internal Revenue Service as a way for them to train on the job training. And I was like a mentor and a trainer. So during that time, for the 10 years I was there, I think I figured it out before I retired last year. We had saved out of about $20 million at issue in these various low-income taxpayer cases. We had saved them about $18 million. And you always think of low-income people, well, why do they need a lawyer? Because they don't have to pay taxes. But if you remember, we had a recession, depression, and we had a lot of people who owed hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. And we were able to help resolve it so they can kind of start over again. These things, for many people, if you owe taxes, you take them to your death. And so that was a very fulfilling thing. And I think one of the advantages of coming here, since only having been, quote, retired for a year, as a lawyer, you're still a lawyer. It's not like you retire except you left that other job. So being able to talk about being retired has been very good. So I've enjoyed it and appreciate meeting many of you and getting to know a lot of you much better than when we were in DC some years ago.
Hi, I'm Charlie Marchant. Lynn, Pearl, thank you very much. Where'd Ron? Ron snuck out. I want to thank Ron for his great words. And Roy, I want to thank you and Will for giving me a great afternoon this afternoon. You can read about who I am and what I think about in the little booklet. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't honor my roommate, Harvey Ross, and the other 6 guys, but Harvey was a funny guy. I'd never met a y'all guy from Mississippi who told me about some of his college events, and they were amazing. My college didn't have those kinds of events. And I won't go into those details. But OCS taught me who I am today. I was a high school teacher for 36 years. I was a coach, a referee, I've been a vice principal, a principal, and I'm not used to having people tell me what to do, including teenagers. And I loved it. And OCS taught me most of those skills, and I want to share a couple of those with you tonight. One of them involves one of our classmates, Bob Bender. I think, was it Chris said he was your roommate?
Yeah.
Well, Bob was my best man at my first wedding. I met Bob at the Manchester recruiting station, where I joined up to, like Lynn, postpone going to Vietnam as long as possible. Bob got to be the team leader because he was the tallest guy. Those tall guys. Sure. I never got to be in a parade. Bob took all the paperwork to Fort Dix. And Bob and his brother Dennis and I, we've had some tremendous experiences. Some of those have mellowed in the last years. But on our way here, we did a road trip from Connecticut to Fort Benning via Brevard, North Carolina, in my 1962 Ford Galaxy XL convertible, which I brought to OCS. It was a hot car. And there were a couple of young guys going to officer candidate school. As we drove in and Roy took us through Victory Drive today and sort of recreated the experience, we got to the gate and the enlisted man at the gate said to Bob, "You're not in the right uniform." And we're supposed to be there at noontime, was it? I think we had to be reported at noon. This is before noon. Bob had gone home with George Arthur. Now, George Arthur was like us, and Bob is 6'2", 210 pounds. And somehow, their clothing got exchanged. And Bob was trying to get into George Arthur's clothes, and it didn't work. So the guy at the gate said, "You're in the wrong uniform." So we drove down, and we did find the place. We drove by. I'm a cemetery person. That's my life in retirement, and has been for many years, including during when I was teaching. We drove into the cemetery, which was the pet cemetery on the base. And Bob stripped down and changed into another uniform. And the lesson I learned was, don't screw up like that. It's going to hurt you. And so Bender got in. I left him off at the barracks. We drove by the barracks where it was. And I was going down the wrong street. By the way, adjacent to the barracks is a Marchant Street. It's not named after me or my family, but I did research that. That's a whole other thing. I had to park the car, which I did. I got into the barracks, and all I could hear was, "Bender, you idiot. Bender, what's the matter with you? Bender, get down." And the lesson there was, somebody else can take the heat as long as you don't screw up. The guy standing next to me was Doug Martz. Doug Martz, bless his soul, now deceased, made the mistake of telling a TAC officer that his relative was a senior officer. That was a bad mistake. But the best advantage for me was nobody bothered me at all. Through 26 weeks of OCS. Marks took all the heat, over and over again. And many times he just didn't get why. I said, you gotta shut your mouth. Lesson number 2, shut up. There's time to be quiet and observe and look carefully at what's going on. The last little lesson had nothing to do with OCS. I came back from Vietnam in a MACV unit early because of the sickness in my family, and ultimately was reassigned to Fort Devens in Massachusetts. I was promoted on the way. I was told on the way after I left that I had been promoted to first lieutenant. And so, but I didn't have any orders. So I had to wear my second lieutenant insignia at Fort Devens. Somewhere along the line, it's around Christmas time, I received the orders, but for some reason never got anywhere to purchase the insignia. So I said, well, it doesn't make any difference. You know, I'm running a night program at Fort Devens. Who cares? I got a message from the commanding general to come to the Christmas party. And then it said RSVP. Well, my mother had Parkinson's disease, and she had a caretaker, and every weekend I would go home from Fort Devens and take care of my mother. So I RSVP'd that I'd be unable to attend the general's Christmas party. The adjutant, or I guess that's what you call, was a first lieutenant, calls me in the office and says, nobody tells the general that he's not coming to the Christmas party. My major had clued me in, number one, that I had the orders, and he said, you need to go get your insignia. And he said, don't you know what date of rank means? I was clueless. I had no idea what date of rank meant. I said, no. He says, date of rank is, you know, if your orders are 2 days before someone else, you outrank them. Oh. It turns I outranked Lieutenant Claudia Kennedy. And then I went in and ordered her to stand up and respectfully tell the commanding general that I would not be at his Christmas party, and that I had date of rank over her, and I gave her the orders to prove it. The major was next door. I left. He was under his desk because he thought it was such that I did this. I received a phone call from the commanding general ordering me to come to his office, which I did. I reported as a good lieutenant would do and came into the office. And he said, why aren't you coming to my party? And I explained to him. And all he said was, tell your mother Merry Christmas. And that was the last time I had a contest of wills in the military. For those of you that know a little bit of history about Lieutenant Kennedy, Lieutenant Kennedy became one of America's female generals. Yes. And at one time was considered for vice presidential candidate. So anyway, the lesson there was in OCS terms, take charge. Take charge. You're an officer, you're a gentleman, and you have to be respectful. Thank you very much.
I'm George Smith. My wife refers to me as Tom. So now everybody knows I'm Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Nice to see you, Tom.
Thank you.
I don't want to go into all the same stories that we've heard, because mine is much the same as Lynn's and you others. I was a miserable student and was destined to be in the Army, so instead I enlisted and went to Fort Lewis, then to Fort Leonard Wood, because they promised me I was going to be an engineer. And they kept their word for that part of it. I became a combat engineer, but that combat engineer thing didn't turn into a combat engineer OCS. So obviously I went to Fort Benning to infantry training. Moved forward. Went to Fort Lewis, training officer. Moved forward. Went to Vietnam. While in Vietnam, I was stationed at the 90th Replacement Battalion as a security officer. 90th Replacement Battalion, for those of you that, some went into Tonsanuk, some went into Cameron Bay, some went into Benoit, and then were transferred into Long Binh to the 90th Replacement Battalion. And then from there assigned out to their various units within the country. So as a security officer, I had the joy of being the night duty officer in a compound full of guys who were either coming into country or leaving. And they wanted to be on the first plane out if they were leaving. If that plane wasn't there, their attitudes were very poor. We also had some serious interaction at that time between the races. And so I dealt with knifings, fistfights, brawls, etc. Now that was just half of my duty. The other half was really enjoyable because I worked in civic actions, and I worked in a village called Cao Tai that was just north of Saigon. And we worked with the people in that village, teaching them things like animal husbandry, which I knew nothing about. But we worked at building an infrastructure within this small little village that was, at that time, a small little village. Water buffalo, dirt, houses that were just kind of tin shacks and so on. But I was in charge of building a school. So I built, acquired the materials and, scrounged through the various units the people who were able to help get that job done. So, anyway, moved forward a few more years. Came home, finally got a college education, taught school for 27 years, moved, from the Tacoma, Washington area to Green Bay, Wisconsin. My wife got a great job offer there. And so we went to Green Bay, and I worked in logistics there. Then moved forward to last August. Last August, I got to take my wife to Vietnam. And we went to the village. It is a thriving, beautiful place. The school is still there. It has enlarged. It's like 4 times the size. It was fantastic, and I got to share it with my wife. So with that, thank you.
Lynn, Earl, thank you. Joe and Lynn, I can't thank you two enough for finding me. This is my first reunion, and I want to thank all of my fellow 93rd Company brothers. This for me has been kind of a catharsis. I've needed this. I've missed you all, and you've made me and my wife Betty G feel so welcome. I can't thank you enough. I wasn't sure how it was going to be, and she was even less sure because she'd not been around the Army. We weren't married, and when we did get married, her whole exposure, I was working for the Secretary of Defense at the time, and so it's not the Army, it was the Department of Defense. So I really appreciate all of you. It was a thrill to see Cliff. He was my roommate. And I mean, it was really funny because he walked around, Bill Pulsford, how are you? And I said, Cliff, how are you? I mean, it was boom. I mean, it was so great. And then Bob, same thing. So you've really made this week very special for us, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. Like all of you, I have a bio that's in the book, and it has a lot of the details. And like so many, I started college, didn't finish it. Like Mr. Jones, the flight safety seemed to be the thing, but it was kind of a blessing. It led to 3 commands, a very successful military career. After a very successful military career, 21 years, a very successful 27-year civilian career. And I did many things in a civilian career. I initially worked as a business developer in a heavy construction company, building infrastructure, roads, sewers, gutters, you name it, from anything from a community to shopping malls to highways. So a lot of different things. In '92, when the economy turned and construction turned, I went back to the government and become a government contracting person, initially as like a subject matter expert on military policy. Did that for a while, became a program manager, and then a director. Next thing I know, I'm a vice president, and then I served several different vice president, senior vice president positions throughout my career. I finished working for a company called ICF International and overseeing their international business worldwide, where we had 23 offices around the world doing business in 89 different countries. Probably the highlight of my civilian career, because each and every day I got to learn something new and different, because we had so many different countries. So that's kind of the long and short of my career. And like I said, I can't thank you all enough for the way you welcomed me back into your arms. It's really been great seeing you all and meeting you all again. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure. I'm Michael Long. I think I made all of these. I'm not sure. Thanks. Earl. Yeah. Anyway, like so many of you, I got out of high school in '64 or thereabouts, and I went to college. Wasn't much of a student, really. I dropped out of college at sort of a bad time, 1967. Didn't take me long to be drafted and be sent down to the good old Fort Bragg. That's a wonderful place in the summertime, just hot, sandy, anyway. And
they sent me to Fort Dix and then on to OCS. And, you know, we did push-ups and ran around and buffed floors and did all the stuff you all did. And it seemed rather meaningless, but it really wasn't. I mean, buffing the floors was sort of silly all the time, but the kind of discipline and the problem-solving process that we sort of had to work through helped. After OCS, I stayed in Benning as a TAC officer, later did airborne. Something else I did too, jungle school. Jungle school was really a neat place. I don't know what they do. We don't think we have anything in Panama. But that was 3 weeks of, well, a zillion mosquitoes. They got lots of mosquitoes in Panama. And there are a lot of animals that will bother you there. Some are very poisonous, so you had to be very attentive. And the good news was that time counted against your Vietnam time, so that was okay. You know, the critters that live in the forest were not shooting at you. But anyway, I got to Vietnam and I got assigned to MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam, and I got assigned to the MAT team down in the Delta. I mean, way down in the Delta, down in the southern part of South Trang Province. And so I showed up as an assistant MAT team leader. And I was an assistant MAT team leader for about 3 weeks or so. We were in the process of moving from one village to another village. And my team leader, in the process of making little trips on these muddy, yucky roads that they had, roads, there were sort of 6 months. He put his Jeep off a bridge and ended up being evacuated. He lived. He's okay, but I got to be suddenly a MAT team leader. So it's me and 5 sergeants and an interpreter. And we lived in these little villages, and we ate a lot of local food. Got to so that Hackwood is a fairly quiet village. There was one street that most of the stores were on. They have one sort of a cafe there. And I would go down there sometimes in the evening with a pad of paper and write about it home, or just sit there and have coffee or a beer. I started running into people there, sat over the table over there. The old guys running the village. Well, those old guys are probably a lot younger than I am today, but we started noticing each other, and the guy who seemed to be in charge of running the village and I started having these wonderful conversations. Of course, he knew Vietnamese and some French and a bit of American, and which isn't quite English. And you know, I knew a little French, a little Vietnamese, so my language training, and a little American. But we'd have these great conversations. We would just grab words, stick them together. No declamation of verbs or anything. That was too complicated. But we just, and sometimes when we get to a point where we didn't understand each other, you just shrug your shoulders and go, "Combien?" Which is, don't understand. And we move on and try again. We never talked about the war. We talked about the village, rice, weather, everything else. And I started to realize that these people were human folks. And I think a lot of Americans over there just wandered around with a rifle in the boondocks, never really got to meet many Vietnamese people. And then I had another little incident happen in the village. It's probably the thing that stands out in Vietnam. My little team of about 5 people, we were alternate boondocks, as I already said. We'd send a couple people in once a week to get more supplies and stuff from province headquarters. Okay, so one day we sent 2 people in, it was their turn. My medic and my translator, my interpreter. So they disappear. And I say, nothing fine, nothing wrong yet. But then people start coming to the little team house, because we used to, somebody got hurt in the village, we'd fix them up. We might have a medic and stuff, and we'd try and take care of them. It was sort of an outreach program of ours. And these people come up, and I gathered that someone was sick. So anyway, I follow this crowd of people from the little village to a little street I'd never been on, going to this dark house I'd never been in, and there's some woman on a bed, and she looks terrible. hardly tell what she would look like. So I said, well, in my broken Vietnamese, I said, take her to my team house and I'll try and see if I can get my med back, or maybe we can get a helicopter. So I'm going through the village with this person on a stretcher and all these people, most of them I've never seen before. And they all come into my house, my compound, in my little house, and I must have had 30 people in my house and all chattering and making noise and stuff. I'm thinking, shouldn't I be worried about security? I mean, who are these people? But, and I'm trying to get on the radio to get the province guys to get me a chopper. And of course, a sick Vietnamese civilian is about the lowest priority anybody had. And it was a nice day. They wasn't aware of any operations anywhere, so I figured I'd shine. And so it's going, I'm on the radio, and then these people are all over the floor, and then they stop talking, and they start stepping away. And my first reaction was, oh shit. You stupid lieutenant, if this lady dies on your team house floor, this will be difficult. So anyway, I ran over and I'm listening for a heartbeat, breath, nothing. So mouth to mouth, pounding on her chest, mouth to mouth, pounding on her chest, and I'm breathing in her mouth. I'm thinking, I wonder what's wrong with this lady. But anyway, she coughs and sputters and starts breathing again. You know, I'm just happy with that idea. And so then I'm really screaming on the radio with him, get me a chopper. And so a chopper came in. And after a while, and every minute seemed like an hour of it, I got her on the chopper alive. And I just, and so not much, I didn't think much of it after that. Until about 4 or 5 weeks later, one evening, a woman comes up to my little team house and knocks. And I asked my interpreter to see who that was, what's that about? And he goes and talks to her, and he talks to her. After this little conversation went on for a long time, he said, do you know who this is? I said, no. He says, that's the woman you saved. She came back to thank you.
Oh, wow.
My reputation in that little village. Hey, that was a good village to be in if you were a mat team leader, from there on in. But it sort of let me know that these are people there. I mean, building schools, building support and stuff, doing some arc-like raid where you're blowing up a damn grid square and killing everybody. If they, we've done the war a little better, maybe we could have made more contacts. And I think that's, that's something that the guys in the 5-sided Pentagon never got hold of. But, so I learned a lot, and a lot of it I think I can, I didn't get much out of college when you think about it, but I learned an awful lot from OCS, my time in the Delta. Later on I came back, I made sure from Vietnam I wrote from college I had trouble with. So I get admissions, I wanted a sympathy vote there, so I got back and graduated from college. Got a job at Fairfax County, Virginia, and worked there for about 41 years, I guess it was. And sometime in there I got a master's degree and a law degree, and I was being a Dundee County attorney for a long time, doing legal work for Fairfax, which is a big county right outside Washington. It was very rewarding, and I think a lot of it belongs to being with you guys. Thank you.
My name is Russ Murphy. I guess the bad news is that I'm an Episcopal priest, and this is a microphone. The good news is I am no longer a young man of promise, and so my bladder will get me out of here fast. Some of the stuff has been really great. I appreciated that. That was terrific. Certainly, everybody really. And then prayer. Gee, Ron, that prayer was great. I'm not going to go through all of the units I was part of and all 365 and wake up. And I had been at 44th Infantry Platoon. I was the commander, platoon commander, 3rd Brigade, 25th Division, for 7 months. And then, of course, the unit went to Hawaii, and the people went elsewhere in Vietnam. And I went up to 101st along with Cliff Purcell. Cliff and I were in Coogee together. He had a trapper platoon, I had a scout dog platoon, and we were roommates for a while too. Yes. And I turned out the way Cliff and I get along. I'm usually just straight man. He was the other guy. And he just takes off. And he was, you know, he was an E6, E7 when he got there, so he knew how to work the Army, which, you know, having gone to base in AIT and arriving in OCS, I didn't know shit. I mean, sorry, pardon my language. Somebody had to say it. You all were so nice. When I arrived home, I was mustered out at Fort Lewis and came home on the plane to St. Louis. And my parents and my sister, my wife couldn't beat me. She was teaching or something that day. I never quite figured that one out. But as we were going to the parking lot at Lambert Field, my mother said, oh, by the way, your father, this was Friday, your father's going into the hospital for exploratory surgery on Monday. Well, he went in on Monday, and he almost died on Monday, and he did die 6 weeks later. So one of the problems with coming home from a combat zone is the last thing you really want to deal with is somebody dying. You just don't. At least I didn't. And so I would stand at the door in his room. He was sitting in one of those, you know, those recliners, and his legs had swollen up. He had malignant melanoma. He had that Irish skin that, you know, burns and peels and burns and peels, and so he got cancer, and he was 54. And so I would stand at the door and I'd watch him. And each day he was kind of ebbing away. My wife actually turned out to be great. She was able to sit down with him. And you know, we had some things to sort out, father-son things. But I just couldn't talk to him. I just could not make myself go into that room and talk to him. Because I spent, you know, the last year wondering, you know, orders coming in and all the stuff that happened. So he died, and I was profoundly impressed. And so I sort of was put on a journey at that point. I needed to explain this whole irrational thing to myself, not just death, but Vietnam. Why the hell were we there? You know, what the heck was this all about? And I always go to fiction when I want to discover something, because in fiction they can give you a whole lot more of the universe than they can. I like nonfiction too, but it doesn't sort out these kinds of issues. And so I arrived once again at Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace. I'd read it the first time in high school for the romance, but I wasn't reading for the romance. I was reading for the spirituality of warfare, the spirituality of violence, the spirituality of soldiering, and it's right there. It's really quite simple in some ways. At the Battle of Borodino, right before, about 80 miles from Moscow, the French and the Russians fought each other. But the French were used to esprit and elan and all of that great stuff. And when they were in the field, everybody would run away. The Russians didn't run away. The Russians stood and died in place. And then I knew what the difference between me, and I'm just leaving it to me because everybody else has different motives than I do, but me and the Vietnamese we fought. They were there for the duration, and they were going to die for it if they had to. I was there for 365 in Waco, and I really didn't much want to be there. So spiritually, they were up here, and I was down there. Okay, so I discovered this for myself. I'm not giving it to you, I'm just telling you it made sense to me. Well, this doesn't exactly preach. I got to tell you, when you say this in church. I had a senior warden who was a colonel, an unrated colonel in the Air Force, retired. Now, if you're a full colonel in the Air Force and you don't fly planes, you are something. And he was a logistical genius, apparently. And he'd been in Thailand with the Air Force during Vietnam. He was proud of his service, and he was pretty damn mad at me for what I said, because his take on the war was that the civilians ran all of and they ran it wrong. They didn't take the advice of the experts. Well, here about 6 months ago, I saw a documentary, and that documentary was called Thud Pilots. It's about the Thunder Chief pilots, the F-105s. Those were the main planes that bombed in the Strait and did North Vietnam. And the problem was that the civilians did all the targeting. So and the civilians didn't know the strategic air way of doing things, which was to take out the anti-aircraft and to take out the opposing planes. So yes, my colonel, who was pissed at me, was right. The civilians really screwed it up. For, 2,500 planes were shot down. So it would be perfectly okay to say, it was a war that was run by civilians and was run badly. But I got to tell you, from my point of view, this was a colonial war that we took over from the French. We should never have done it. And we fought it with the worst possible people to fight it, which was draftees, because draftees aren't committed to that kind of experience. Now that's just me. I had to explain it to myself. I'm offering it to you. You can say what you want. As I say, me and the microphone, you're stuck with me for a few minutes anyway. Listen, my relationship with Cliff has always been good. Yeah, he's a terrific guy, and I couldn't be prouder of the guy. He was aide to Colin Powell. He had a high school education when he came to OCS, and the part that I played in his life was I knew how to take tests, and he didn't know how to study or to take tests, so I did that for him, and he took care of the Army for me. That's what happened. And so here we are, two entirely different people, and of course he's gone on and gotten his undergraduate degree and a master's degree, and he's had a successful civilian job. I couldn't be prouder than to have been part of his life. And his life is your life. It's all together with you guys. I've been to college. my time to go, I think.
All right, the winner. Ta-da. Good job. Yeah. Is that close? Oh, ding. Okay, next.
Just before we have 7-0.
416. Ta-da.
Yay.
And our next bottle goes to
346399. So 399.
399.
399.
What?
Going once. Going twice. Okay, assume it's Carlson, Purcell, or somebody. All right, next one.
Must be present.
517.
Last three. 517. Okay, Grandma. Yes. Okay, now this is the big one. I'm gonna stir.
444.
Oh, your 444. Was that Vietnamese? No. 444. Come on.
3464444.
No? Okay.
Wow.
Boy, Carlson and Purcell won a lot.
457.
457.
No? Hard to believe. 3 tickets. Winner.
441.
Oh, man.
Yo! Whoa! All right!
Short, but I'm loud.
You are the winner of the banner, and we even have a box for it.
Oh,
and we will roll that up for you.
And stuff it, yeah.